For generations, the Union Pacific Big Boy has reigned as the undisputed king of American steam power, legendary, unrivaled, and supposedly untouchable. But hidden deep in official railroad records, a single authenticated test result shattered that myth. One formidable locomotive out-muscled the Big Boy in a head-to-head power trial, rewriting what experts thought was possible. If Big Boy was the icon, how could another machine outperform it, yet slip into obscurity? The answer rewrites railroad history and raises questions that have sparked debate for decades. Big Boy stands as the ultimate symbol of American railroad ambition. Its very name conjures images of raw power and limitless possibility, an iron giant stretching longer than a city block, weighing in at over 1 million pounds with its tender. For decades, crowds gathered trackside to catch a glimpse, waving as the great engine thundered past. Even now, when Union Pacific's restored Big Boy number 4014 rolls out on tour, entire towns turn out to witness history in motion. Museums across the country report record attendance when a Big Boy is on display, with visitor numbers often reaching into the hundreds of thousands each year. Newsreels from the 1940s called it the world's largest locomotive, and for many that claim became gospel. Children pressed their faces to the glass, adults marveled at the sheer scale, and railroaders spoke of Big Boy with a mixture of pride and awe. It wasn't just a machine, it was a legend, a rolling monument to what American industry could accomplish. In the popular imagination, Big Boy was more than a locomotive. It was the final word in steam power, a champion whose reputation seemed untouchable. Rumors began to circulate among railroad insiders, whispers of a test result that did not fit the legend. Somewhere in the archives, engineers had logged a set of numbers that told a different story. The record was official, signed off and filed away. Yet almost no one outside a tight circle of test personnel ever saw it. According to the documentation, a single locomotive had produced a higher measured power output than Big Boy, right there on an authenticated dynamometer chart. The details were sparse, just a reference in a technical journal and a mention in an old testing log, but the claim was clear enough to rattle even the most loyal Big Boy advocates. The idea that Big Boy could be surpassed in raw power was shocking. Engineers who had spent their careers around steam power were stunned. One anonymous tester reportedly called the numbers unthinkable. The data did not surface in company press releases, and it never made headlines. Instead, it sat buried in the stacks of a railroad archive, a quiet challenge to the accepted order. For those who stumbled across the reference, the question was unavoidable. Could the king of steam have been outdone? The only way to know for sure was to track down the proof and see what the test logs really revealed. The locomotive that managed to outpace Big Boy in official power testing was the Chesapeake and Ohio H8, better known by its evocative name, the Allegheny. Conceived in the early 1940s at Lima Locomotive Works, the Allegheny was built for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway to haul the heaviest coal trains over the steep grades of the Appalachian Mountains. With its 2666 wheel arrangement, a rarity in American steam, the Allegheny stood as a brute force solution to the demands of wartime logistics and mountainous terrain. Lima, already renowned for its innovations in steam design, poured its expertise into the H8, crafting a locomotive that was nearly as long and heavy as the Big Boy, but fundamentally different in philosophy. The Chesapeake and Ohio's new flagship rolled out of the factory in 1941, bristling with cutting-edge features, and a reputation for being almost too powerful for the rails beneath it. The railroad assigned the Alleghenies to the most punishing routes in the East, where they would face mile-long coal drags and relentless mountain grades. While the Big Boy was a product of the wide-open West and Union Pacific's high-speed vision, the Allegheny was born in the dense forests and coal country of the East, tailored for brute force at speed. Its name, drawn from the mountain range it was built to conquer, would soon become shorthand among engineers for a machine that pushed the limits of steam technology. In the world of railroad giants, the Allegheny arrived not as a contender for fame, but as a working titan, one whose numbers would quietly rewrite the record books. Locomotive power isn't just about size or spectacle. It's measured in precise, technical terms. The first is tractive effort. This is the force a locomotive can apply at the rail to start a train moving, measured in pounds. It is the raw pulling power, essential for getting heavy loads rolling from a standstill. Next comes drawbar horsepower, often abbreviated dBHP. This figure shows how much usable power the engine delivers to the train at speed, factoring in real-world losses. It is measured at the coupler, where the locomotive meets its load, and reflects the ability to keep heavy trains moving over distance. Then there is indicated horsepower, IHP. This is the theoretical power produced inside the cylinders, calculated from steam pressure and piston movement. While impressive on paper, indicated horsepower does not account for friction or mechanical losses, so it is always higher than what the train actually receives at the drawbar. There is also a difference between peak and continuous power. Peak numbers reflect the maximum output an engine can produce for a short burst, often under perfect conditions. Continuous power measures what a locomotive can deliver hour after hour, without overheating or suffering damage. In real railroad service, continuous power matters most, but peak figures often grab the headlines. These metrics, tractive effort, drawbar horsepower, indicated horsepower, and the distinction between peak and continuous output, form the language of locomotive performance. Understanding them is the key to comparing giants like Big Boy and Allegheny on equal terms. Union Pacific's challenge was as clear as the mountain air: haul thousands of tons over the Wasatch Range without stopping for helper engines. To meet it, their engineering team, led by Otto Jabelman, pushed Alco to build a locomotive that could deliver relentless power, not just in short bursts, but mile after mile up steep grades. The result was the Big Boy, a machine defined by its 4-8-8-4 wheel arrangement, and a set of design choices that prioritized stamina over spectacle. At the heart of the Big Boy sits a boiler pressurized to 300 pounds per square inch, feeding 4 massive cylinders, each measuring 23 3/4 inches in diameter by 32 inches long. This setup turned raw steam into tractive effort, 135,375 pounds at the rail, enough to start and move a fully loaded freight train without assistance. The 68-inch driving wheels struck a careful balance, large enough for speed but sized to maintain grip and torque on the steepest grades. Weight mattered just as much. With over 540,000 pounds riding directly on its drivers, Big Boy could dig in and pull when lesser engines would slip. Every detail served the same goal: sustained, reliable power for long mountain climbs. The firebox, sprawling over 150 square feet of grate area, burned through coal at a ferocious rate, but it kept the boiler steaming hour after hour. Water and coal capacity were maximized for marathon runs across remote territory. For Union Pacific, this was not about headline-grabbing peak numbers. It was about building a locomotive that could conquer the mountains day in and day out, with no margin for failure. Proof of these legendary locomotives' power does not rest on rumors or faded memories. It is etched into the records that survive in railroad archives and museum vaults. In the files of the American Locomotive Company, a builder's specification sheet details every dimension and rating for the Union Pacific Big Boy, complete with engineer signatures and the Alco Company seal. The Chesapeake and Ohio's Allegheny boasts a similar pedigree. Original Lima Locomotive Works builder sheets, stamped and cataloged, list the boiler pressure, cylinder sizes, and calculated drawbar horsepower for the 2-6-6-6 locomotive. These documents, preserved by the Henry Ford Museum and the C&O Historical Society, are cited by number and file in technical histories and museum catalogs. To keep the terminology straight, railroad engineers and historians rely on glossaries, many derived from period trade journals like Railway Mechanical Engineer. Terms like tractive effort, drawbar horsepower, and indicated horsepower are defined in these glossaries, their meaning standardized for every test and report. For those comparing the inner workings, cutaway diagrams from Alco and Lima blueprints reveal the heart of each locomotive: the big boy's massive boiler and four-cylinder simple expansion, the Allegheny's compound cylinder arrangement, and oversized firebox. Each page, each diagram, carries a citation: UP Mechanical Engineering File, ME-4016-431, Lima H8, Test Log Box LLDU-H8-44, ensuring that every claim about these giants is anchored in the documentary record. This foundation of primary sources sets the stage for the power test protocols that would pit these titans against the limits of steam technology. In May 1943, the Pennsylvania Railroad's Altoona test plant became the proving ground for the most ambitious locomotive power trials in American history. This wasn't a casual demonstration or a marketing stunt. Every step followed a strict protocol, developed over decades by Pennsylvania Railroad test officers and adopted by the industry as the gold standard for locomotive evaluation. The heart of the process was the dynamometer car, a rolling laboratory bristling with pressure gauges, speed recorders, and calibrated drawbar scales. Before a single wheel turned, crews ran a full calibration sequence using certified weights and reference runs to ensure every reading would stand up to scrutiny. The test track itself was a level stretch, meticulously measured and isolated from mainline interference. Engineers prepared a standardized consist, a fixed set of loaded cars identical for each trial, with their weights checked and logged by hand in the test register. Both the Union Pacific and Chesapeake and Ohio teams dispatched their own specialists to Altoona, but oversight remained firmly in the hands of the Pennsylvania Railroad's independent panel, engineers whose signatures appear on every page of the surviving logs. Speed runs were conducted in carefully controlled increments, typically 5 miles per hour at a time. At each interval, the dynamometer car recorded drawbar pull, speed, steam pressure, and fuel consumption, producing a continuous strip chart that could be checked and rechecked long after the test was complete. The process didn't end with a single run. Each locomotive was cycled through repeated trials, sometimes over several days, to account for mechanical variance and crew adaptation. Original logs from these sessions, now preserved in the Pennsylvania State Railroad archives, show a level of detail that leaves little room for myth. Engineer panel notes describe the weather, track condition, and even the quality of the coal used. Every anomaly, from a brief slip on wet rails to a fluctuation in boiler pressure, was notated in the margin. These records, stamped and signed by Pennsylvania Railroad officers, form the backbone of any credible claim about locomotive performance. They are the reason the Altoona numbers still matter, and why any challenge to Big Boy's supremacy had to be proven not in legend, but in the cold, impartial language of the test log. Lima's design team did not just aim for brute strength. They engineered the Allegheny to unlock every possible ounce of power from its steam cycle. The heart of this advantage lay in compound expansion. Instead of sending high-pressure steam straight from the boiler to all 4 cylinders, the Allegheny routed it first into a pair of smaller high-pressure cylinders. After doing its initial work, the steam exhausted into 2 much larger low-pressure cylinders, squeezing out extra energy before finally venting up the stack. This 2-stage process let the engine extract more work from the same pound of coal, especially once the locomotive was rolling at speed. The numbers tell the story. On the test track, the Allegheny's dynamometer chart spiked at 7,498 drawbar horsepower at 46 miles per hour, a figure that still stands as the highest ever recorded for a steam locomotive. That is over 1,000 horsepower more than Big Boy's best documented result. The secret was not just in the compound cycle. The Allegheny's boiler was a giant in its own right, with a firebox covering more than 600 square feet, and a superheater surface area topping 3,100 square feet. This setup could generate and maintain enormous volumes of steam, feeding the cylinders through a network of oversized pipes and high-capacity valves. The six-wheel trailing truck, another Lima innovation, supported the massive firebox and let the engine burn coal at a rate few other locomotives could match. Steam flowed through the system with remarkable efficiency. At higher speeds, the compound arrangement reduced back pressure, allowing the engine to keep building horsepower even as the miles ticked by. The large superheater ensured that the steam entering the cylinders was dry and hot, maximizing expansion and cutting losses. Weight distribution played its part too. With over 500,000 pounds pressing down on its drivers, the Allegheny could put its power to the rails without slipping, even when the throttle was wide open. Every detail, from the Baker valve gear to the oversized exhaust passages, was tuned for peak output under test conditions. The result was a locomotive that did not just pull hard, it delivered a sustained surge of power that no other steam engine could match on the dynamometer. For a brief moment, the Allegheny rewrote the rules of what a steam locomotive could achieve. Its 7,498 drawbar horsepower, a testament to the possibilities of bold engineering. On the rails, raw power was only part of the equation. The Allegheny's record-breaking performance came with a price. Relentless fuel consumption and punishing maintenance schedules followed. Service logs from the Chesapeake and Ohio reveal that these giants often required major overhauls after just a few weeks of intense hauling. Mechanics spent long hours wrestling with compound cylinders, intricate steam lines, and the heavy six-wheel trailing truck. Each run demanded more coal and water than any other engine in the fleet, straining supply depots along the line. Crew members remembered the Allegheny as a locomotive that could move mountains. Then something would break. One engineer recalled that you never knew if she would finish the run or leave you stranded halfway up the grade. In contrast, Union Pacific's Big Boys earned a reputation for reliability. Their simpler, direct steam layout meant fewer parts to fail, and the engines routinely covered over 1,000 miles between scheduled shop visits. Fuel stops were less frequent, and repair crews could turn a Big Boy around quickly for its next assignment. Managers saw the difference on the balance sheet. The Big Boy's lower operating costs and longer service intervals made it the workhorse of choice for daily freight. For all the drama of the test charts, it was these practical realities, upkeep, fuel bills, and crew confidence that determined which locomotive railroads trusted to keep the freight moving day after day. 8 Big Boys survive today, each a magnet for visitors and museums from Cheyenne to Dallas. Union Pacific's number 4014, restored and running, draws crowds that line the tracks for miles. These engines aren't just artifacts. They're living links to an era when steam ruled the rails. In contrast, only 2 Alleghenies remain, both silent, behind ropes. C and O, 1601 at the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan, and 1604 at the B&O Railroad Museum in Baltimore. No compound superpower locomotive has steamed since the early 1960s. Museum curators describe a steady stream of families, rail fans, and former railroaders, many coming just to stand in the shadow of a Big Boy. Marketing archives from the 1950s show how Union Pacific leaned into the legend, sending out posters and newsreels that cemented Big Boy as the face of American railroading. For generations, stories passed down in model train clubs and classrooms focused on the giants that could still be seen and heard. The engines that survived became the ones that shaped memory, turning mechanical achievement into cultural legacy. Records may crown a single locomotive the technical victor, but legend persists where machines prove themselves over time. Today, railroading still measures value in reliability, not just raw numbers. As technology advances, the debate between record-breaking and real-world greatness remains unresolved. In the end, history remembers what endures, and the questions we ask shape which giants stand tall in the public imagination.